New Wave Community Media.
It's just J-Mike.
Hey, Kori.
Why are you laughing?
Because you looked at me like you were going to start it.
I was getting ready to say, and then I said, but hey, Nefi, how are you today?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I can't complain.
Oh, that's good. That's good. But have you ever noticed that we were just having this conversation a few days ago? Because our son, it was his birthday. And we're talking about how we've never physically, like, what do you not punish him? But like, we never hit him, right?
No, we never put hands on him.
Pretty much. But apparently that there's a thing called gentle parenting. Have you heard about that?
Some things I've heard about it.
I know, me too. But
but
I do know somebody who's an expert in this.
Okay.
So let's talk about that.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Everything But Perfect. So let's continue with our chit chat challenge. We've done, I think, 4 thus far.
Mm-hmm.
My scalp massager just fell. Okay. I guess I won't be massaging my scalp for this episode. But the chit chat challenge, we pose a question and we hope that you go on and ask your partner, your friends, your neighbors, whoever you want to have more meaningful, deeper conversations with. So this week, we're going to try the following. What is the worst advice you have ever gotten?
Ooh, that's a good one. Because I feel a lot of time people try to give you something positive, which are a good thing, but it might not be the right one.
But is it bad advice because it's bad, or bad because you didn't take it and then do you get what I'm saying?
Both. But let's reach out to our audience and let's see what type of bad advice have you gotten. So feel free. Let us know. Slide into our DMs at everythingButPerfect.pod on Instagram. But today I'm actually more excited about this because we have a special guest.
Tell me.
We have a super special guest. This person I've known pretty much all my life. They've been around. It kind of sucks that they are not near me physically, destination wise, but they always have a special place in my heart. And this person is my cousin Wendy, who also goes by Wendy.
Yay! Welcome, Wendy. Welcome,
Wendy.
Aw, thank you so much for that sweet introduction. I love you guys. I feel so fortunate to be here with you guys today. Yeah. And yes, Nefi, we're far away, but our hearts are always connected.
Yes, definitely. And the reason, I thought about you is because you are a full-time working mom that practices gentle parenting. Would you agree?
Yes, I do.
So let's start. So I think this term has been thrown around a lot lately, as different generations are now starting to have kids and learning new things. So more or less, what is gentle parenting? How can we define that? Explain that to our audience.
That's a really great question. I think that the idea of gentle parenting has existed for a really long time. Just as before, it was known or introduced in psychology as authoritative parenting. It's the same idea as authoritative parenting, where parents essentially build connections and relationships with their children and raise them, I guess, or discipline them from a place of respect and love and connection, rather than a place of neglect or disciplining with violence or just kind of coming and going. So it really is a practice of parenting with respect. And it's actually gotten a lot of different names in the past few years, from gentle parenting to respectful parenting to holistic and curious parenting. I've even heard people call it like liberated parenting, especially in groups that practice a form of of resistance to oppression, such as like liberated or decolonized parenting. In a sense, I've also, I use the term gentle parenting or authoritative parenting often for myself, but also lean more towards the idea of a liberated parenting or a decolonized type of parenting because of the lens of being a woman of color and a child of an immigrant, being an immigrant myself, and having come from like generations of trauma, right? So kind of like healing those lines in my ancestry. And so there are a lot of names to it. And I think a lot of times it just depends the lens that from which you are parenting and what you're using or what practices you're using to lead your parenting in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting because I hadn't really heard of those other, terms that it's called, but they completely make sense for what the practice is, right? Like it's changing what I guess the normative was before to this.
Because it's true. Because I would even say, like, we've talked about it in past episodes, that for us, like growing up in a household with, like immigrant parents, like I feel a lot of times it was like a place from fear. They were disciplining us, but from a place of fear. Like there were times where like I feared my parents, and like I feared like getting hit, so I wouldn't want to do the bad things, or didn't want to get in trouble, but it was coming from a place of fear, not from like, I want to do right, which is, I think, a big part of it, of changing that mindset, changing that mentality for your children, because why grow up in a house full of fear rather than love when you can still get, I would say, better results using this alternative parenting than the old school.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely agree with that.
So like now that you have a child, how old is your daughter?
She's 3. She's going to be 4 this summer. I'm so excited. She's such a spoot. I didn't mean spoot. I was trying to say she's so spunky, but she's also such a hoot, but it came together as spoot.
Well, that's kind of gruel.
That's gruel.
But yeah, she's a lot of fun. She has this fun little personality and knows what she wants. She's known what she's wanted since she was born. And we just have a lot of fun together, and also have difficult moments, but it never overshadows our day or makes, events like, oh, well, now the day's ruined,
Right.
It's always very much like, oh, well, you're a human experiencing human emotions. Let's work through them.
Yeah. So that actually brings me to my next question, which I think it's a little bit more kind of like more deep. Is this for you, like, as you, as your daughter started growing up, like, did you make a conscious decision to do it, or was it more just like natural, or you just started doing natural, like parenting that specific way naturally?
So it was very, very intentional. It was deliberate. I don't know, you kind of grow up like, I want to do this when I grow up, or I want to do that when I grow up. And for me, it was always like, yes, I want to have a career. I want to have a life. I want to have all these things, but I've always wanted to be a mom. And it's interesting because, for me, I do have a career. I do have like an education, and I worked really hard for all of these things to be in place, but they were always a means to an end. For me, the means to an end was always like my child or my children. And so when in preparation for that, in preparation to becoming a parenting, it was like, well, what do I want for her? What kind of life do I want her to have? What experiences? What kind of parent do I want to be? And what kind of relationship am I going to build with her? Not only while she's like a child, a teenager, and young adult, but like even more so when she's like has her own family, when she has, her own life apart from mine. Like right now, our lives are very much intertwined, but at some point her life is going to be completely separate from mine. But what do I want that life to look like, right? For her and for me. And so this idea of parenting with love and respect, and decolonizing a lot of what what we are taught when we were younger, or what our parents were taught, is building that foundation ultimately.
Mm.
And it's hard because, you know, obviously we're all Latinos. And we grew up in that culture that for so long was based on, like, discipline was based on yelling and throwing stuff and not necessarily teaching.
That chancla.
Yeah, like chancla, the belt, I mean, whatever was within his reach. And it was more of the action, right? Like, I'm going to hit you, or come here, I'm going to hit you. But it was, I, at least in my experience, and you both can probably like tell me yours, but it was never like, this is why I hit you. It was like, I'm just going to do, for example, oh, you came late, I'm going to hit you. And it's like, okay, well, the reason why I didn't want you to stay out late was because, you know, and have those conversations. It never was like that. It was just like, boom. And then you're like, okay, I guess.
Go to your room.
And it wasn't helpful, not to me, at least.
Yeah. And I think that's another important thing to think about, because if you think about it, for our parents, like, that's how they were raised as well, right? So they were only doing it based on what they knew and what their experience. And of course, I know that our parents wanted better for us, and you know, they did a lot of things to put us in a better situation. But certain things, it's hard to break certain habits, you know. And I think that's another thing, that our parents, maybe they weren't ready to change, or didn't have the resources to do it, but they did do their best, you know. And but now that we're adults and we're having kids and children, like, I feel that we're a little bit more conscious and know the effects of that. You know, for us, like, I know that like hitting doesn't really help. You know, like you were saying, if you talk to the child, if you explain to them, I feel that they understand more, and then they're able to kind of like put things together in a non, I guess, violent environment.
Right.
And, you know, for us, I feel that we've also, I feel like it's funny because I feel unknowingly we kind of started doing that, because we never really hit our son and things like that. But overall, he's a good child. But every time something has came up, we do have those conversations and we see the difference.
Yeah, I guess I didn't know that we had gentle parented him until we did. Until maybe recently, as we, you know, he's growing up and obviously he's a teenager. People are like, oh, how is he? You know, teenagers don't ever talk to you and stuff like that. I'm like, what? And he has his moments, just kind of like Wendy just said, right? You have good days and you have bad days. But yeah, overall, I was like, I guess unknowingly we did a good thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then as far as like,
he's such a good kid.
Thank you. And then like for you, Wendy, like what would you say was your core reasoning of why you decided to take this different approach?
Oh my gosh, I could like write a whole book about this. But I think it comes a lot down to like what you were saying, Nefi, like with our parents, like, you know, your mom and my mom like shared parents. And I think a lot about our grandma, who Vicky is named after, Victoria, and how, you know, I when I got pregnant, I started thinking a lot about like motherhood and what motherhood meant to me, and you know, the legacy of my grandma and the legacy of my mom, and you know how, I don't know, Nephew, how much, you know, your mom talks about our grandma, but I feel like they talk about her a lot, and they kind of talk about her in the sense of like, she was like not only like 10 children of her own parent, but she had like extended children.
Yeah.
Like there were children in her home all the time. We have uncles and aunts that are not necessarily like blood related to us, but that they grew up with our grandma, with our parents. I think even your dad, Nephew, was part of that.
Yeah.
You know, like your dad was part of that community that our grandmother created, where like these children were being taken care of more or less. And I think about a lot of these things come back from like childhood, and the very little bit that I know about our grandmother's childhood. And oh my gosh, I might cry. But you know, like how she became an orphan very young. You know, she was orphaned at like 12 years old. raised by, somebody else, and didn't really have parents. And I think that when she became a parent, she was very intentional in providing her children with everything she didn't have, right?
Mm.
So with love and attention and food and housing, and an education, if that's what they wanted, right? And that education looked different for each one of her children, but also because she wasn't raised or didn't really have parents, there's a lot of ways that she was also parenting 10 plus children in survival mode. Like she was very poor. She would make a miracle cooking one chicken for 10 children. She was providing their basic needs, but also doing it with very little support and very little education, right? Because she didn't really have much of an education. And so of course the discipline came from like, don't bring shame to our family. Don't listen to what we say. It was very like fear-based, but I think it was because she was also living in a lot of fear, because her childhood was full of a lot of fear. And I think that, transplanting that into like our parents, and I think that the idea is very common, right? Like our grandparents grew up in a war, in like, the civil war in Guatemala and in El Salvador, and so they grew up with fear and the idea of like, what are other people gonna say? Que van a pensar que son malcriados, you know what I mean? The idea of children that we have to raise to be good people in the society, but also like, how do we do that? And they didn't have the tools. And because they didn't have the tools, then our parents didn't have the tools. They didn't know how. So, and then for both you and I, Nefi, like our mothers are very unique in the sense that they came to the US and they were immigrants and they didn't know the language, and they made all these sacrifices for us, and we're grateful for them, but we're also very cognizant of the fact that they were also experiencing a lot of fear on their end. And so a lot of that fear kind of was transferred to us, a lot of that frustration. And it's not a judgment call on them at all, but more of like looking at our ancestors from a place of love and empathy, and trying to understand where they were coming from when it came to introducing a violent kind of discipline. Knowing that they just didn't know any better, and that, my mom was a single mom and she was working and she was tired and she was overwhelmed. And so for me, coming into the idea of like gentle parenting, it was like, well, I'm going to heal the parts of my inner child that were harmed, that need to heal, so that I no longer bring this narrative into my child, into her life, like the violence ends here.
Right.
But also in a way, healing my mom, healing my grandmother and their experiences, and helping heal the lineage of pain. For me, that I think that's the intentional point of it. And remembering that like, this is just as much as it is a practice of like speaking to your child and being respectful to your child, it's a very spiritual practice. Because it comes down to understanding like, how am I connected? How is my experience connected to that of my ancestors? And it comes from a deep sense of love, like, how would I have parented my grandmother? How would I have parented my mom, so that they could have parented me differently? And not to say that they did a bad job. I think that we're good people. We came out okay. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
With some trauma, with some stuff that we need to work through, obviously, but not like in the sense of the way we're taking the healing that they were able to do and amplify it.
Yeah, and I think that's another big part of it as well, is the healing part, because like you mentioned earlier, I think the more important thing, like even for us and for me personally, the reason I didn't want to, like raise our child like that was because of that, because I knew how I felt it, right? So having that conscious like knowing and not just for him but also future generations. It's like I'm healing not just myself, I'm healing whatever trauma that I was able to pass on to my child and helping him heal, but not also that, but also past lives. Like once you start going into that spiritual and you start healing yourself, you're able to start healing your parents, your grandparents, and it keeps going down. And not only healing your past, it's also setting up the future. And because, just kind of like just with everything, like at one point, this wasn't part of our lineage, right? But if we're able to stop it now, then how much better is our future generation of our children going to be? And I think that's another part of it is eventually something has to stop or somebody has to take that. Yeah, someone has to take that charge. And that's why I do feel that our generation is taking the first step to be able to heal not just our past, but also our future. So I think that's another important thing about gentle parenting is that healing part of it, because I think that is probably more important than like the other things, because like you mentioned, our parents probably went through a lot rougher. They did go through a lot rougher situation than we did, but they did their best. And like you said, we came out okay, but now it's to better our next generation. Which is
and who's to say that they didn't do healing for us in their own way, right? Like a grandma, like she knew what it was like to be parentless, so she became a mother to the community. And my mom knew what it was like to feel not neglected. I don't want to say she was neglected in any way, but kind of, sometimes getting lost in the in the huffle and shuffle, kind of like there were so many children. And so she really focused on developing deep connections with my brother and me. So not to say that they didn't do their part in healing, because I think they did. But it's how can we amplify that for our future generations? And who's to say that I'm not messing up, right? Like, I'm sure Ruby's going to sit in my daughter's name is Ruby. I'm sure Ruby's going to sit in a therapist's office 20 years from now and being like, oh my gosh, my mom this, my mom that. I have no doubt about that. And hopefully she will, right? I hope that she will, so that she can learn, so that she can grow, so that anybody that she comes in contact with in her life can also heal, so that she can heal. I think that's essentially what it comes down to, and why for me, that's what keeps me going, right? Because the thing about, this kind of parenting, this kind of conscious parenting, is that it is hard. It is so hard. It is so much easier to like lose your mind and to scream and to, want to like shake them. And, it's so much easier to lose control than it is to like manage your own emotions. And I think a lot of what conscious parenting comes down to is like, if you're not in a place where you can manage yourself and doing it with like intentionality, like it's not going to work.
Right.
Because you can't manage or help another child manage their emotions in their difficult times if you are also out of control. I think a lot of it comes down to like, where are you in your own spiritual journey to manage yourself in order to help manage another human being who is just barely learning to name, their own emotions. Like, like Ruby, she doesn't know how to label frustration. So I have to teach her to do that without becoming frustrated myself. I listened to this one. I listen to a lot of, I'm also like a learner. I don't consider myself an expert in this in any way, but I do learn a lot. And there was this one person who like wrote a book who talked about, I think it was, what's her name? Dr. Becky Kennedy. And she kind of compared gentle parenting in difficult times as like, imagine your child is in an airplane, right? And all of a sudden the airplane there's a lot of turbulence and it's really scary. And what would you prefer, being in that child's place? A pilot who comes in and is like, oh my gosh, we're all going to die. We're like in trouble. Or a pilot who's like, well, deal with it yourself. You're a big girl. Like, you're a big boy, like manage it. You know how to manage it. Or a pilot who comes in is like, I see that you're scared, but I'm the expert. I'm in charge. I'm going to get us to land safely. I'm going to take us where we need to go. And I really, really liked that kind of metaphor, because it really is like that when it comes to parenting.
Yeah.
What experience are we giving our child in this turbulent life? You know, and really seeing them as like experience in the world for the first time. Like there's the good, but there's also like the scary and the turbulent. Like how are we gonna introduce them to this world? Like the world is already harsh and cruel enough. They need a leader who's gonna help them learn, so that when we're gone, so that when we're not here anymore, they have the tools, they have the skills. Ultimately, it's teaching our children how to live without us, right? And being able to do it successfully.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I like that metaphor because it's true. I think sometimes because we see kids as little, that, you know, like you said, they're still learning so much things. We don't stop to really see them for the human being that they are, because eventually they're going to grow up, right? And they're going to take part of in our society. They're going to do all these things that we as parents are doing now. But if we don't take our responsibility as parents seriously, it becomes really hard, because I think also there's this notion that's like, well, they'll go to school, they'll learn it in school, and I'm the parent, I'm just going to provide the shelter and the food and, you know, make sure like they don't break a leg. But there's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And it's just like you said, like teaching them that these emotions are valid to have, first of all, and then how to navigate them so that they don't take over the whole person.
Yeah, and I think it is important as parents to be that voice of reasoning for them, because if it's not us, who is it going to be? It's going to be their peers or somebody who's not, maybe doesn't have the good intentions and things like that. Yeah. And ultimately, we want to be that voice of reasoning in their head when they're young and even to adulthood, because that's what we're here to do. So I think it's very important to do that.
Yeah.
But I really did like that analogy, because it's true. Like when you're saying it, it's just like, you're right. Like, you know, it all depends on who's in charge. You know, the pilot, that based on his or her response will change your emotion. So as you were saying that, like I was like, it's amazing how much influence we have on our child, and I think a lot of times we don't realize that. Yeah. You know, but you know, hearing it from you, you know, it does kind of put it into perspective. Like, oh man, like, you know, like we said before, words are very powerful, you know, and what we tell them and what we show them, they will take to heart and, you know, and take it and do with what they need to do with that information.
Yeah, I really like this quote I read once, and I wish I could tell you who is all of these people, but I mean, I just don't remember. But somebody was saying, like, when you have a baby, you're not just having a baby. You know, that's a really short time. You're having a human being, just like you were saying, Kori. You're having a person. And adding to that, it's like a person that didn't necessarily choose to be here. Exactly. You know, like this is a choice we made. Like I chose to bring you to this world, so it's my responsibility to feed you, house you, keep you alive, keep you safe. But also, like, because I chose to bring you into this world, it is also my responsibility to leave you in this world with the skills that you need to live in it. So I think a lot of what parenting comes down to is figuring out, what does parenting look like for you? Why are you doing it? Like what is the fuel that's going to keep you going when things get rough, when they become agitated, when they're having tantrums, whether the tantrum is when they're 2 or the tantrum is when they're 20. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, because even now as adults, we still have tantrums. You know what I mean? Yes. Like we get hungry, we get upset, and we start, you know, so like it really comes down to helping them be a human, helping them figure it out, and eliminating this idea of like chancla culture and like, this is how I was raised, so this is how I'm going to raise Because at the end of the day, and I think it's funny because, like, you know, in social media for a time, there was this, you know, kind of like funny memes or funny TikTok videos about, you know, parents or people acting like their mothers, throwing the chancla and all of that. And it's meant to be very funny. But as I've entered into this practice, I'm like, it's actually not that funny. Like, it's actually very painful. Because even though it's a collective trauma that we're all kind of like, all of us Latinos are bonding on, it is a trauma. And there's pain involved in that. Like, we're kind of like making light of this pain, but it's a real pain. And something that I've remembered, or that I've kind of, you know, come upon recently, is understanding that this idea of corporal punishment, as you were saying, Nefi, a little earlier, is that it didn't start within our Latino community. Like, this idea of corporal punishment was introduced into Indigenous communities. As a matter of fact, in a lot of Indigenous communities, children are seen as like these sacred gifts, you know, like knowledge holders. They're respected. And they actually have a direct connection to nature and the universe for the simple fact that they are deeply connected to themselves.
Yes.
Because one thing that children have that we as adults lose very easily is a deep connection to our feelings.
And
like,
you're
like
right.
Children, like, I see Ruby and she's like, Mommy, I'm hungry. And if I'm hungry, I'm going to tell you I'm hungry. And if I'm not fed, I'm going to cry. Right? That's what a child will do. What do we do when we're hungry? Like, we're like, oh no, I have to finish this email, or I have to, like, you know, I have to drive to the grocery store, or I have to do this. And so we learn to start ignoring our emotions and our body's needs. Because there's other priorities or other things that take over. Whereas children, they're like, no, like, this made me sad, or this made me angry, and I'm going to feel it.
Yes.
And a lot of times with, like, what happened with a lot of us is, like, instead of our parents helping us navigate through the feeling because they were afraid, or they were made to feel afraid of their own feelings, they were afraid of our big feelings too. So it was like, well, how do I make this stop? Right? We'd hear parents say, like, you want to cry about something? I'll give you something to cry about. Right? Like, well, something that for us was very, very real and very valid. Like, they were afraid of that. And so they had to find ways to make us stop because they didn't know how to manage that. And a lot of gentle parenting is that. It's like, well, yeah, you're having the big feeling. Let's name it. Let's feel it, because that is healthy. Emotions are healthy. There's no such thing as a bad feeling. It's what you do with that feeling, right? And so it really is such an intentional thing and such an intentional practice that you have to commit to every single day, every single minute of your day, because it's very easy to also lose control.
And I think especially at those younger age, you know, like they say the terrible twos or whatever, when they go through those things, it's like you also have to navigate your feelings and and control yourself, because how are you able to show control, to show it's okay to feel these type of ways if you're not showing it? You know, it's just a complete contradiction. You know, just like, that's a perfect example. Is like, oh, you want to cry? Let me hit you. Like, I'll give you something to cry about. Like, that's a perfect example. It's like, okay, how are you going to make me stop crying by hitting me so that I stop crying? Like, it doesn't make sense, you know? And I think that's like the perfect example of I would say us, like our generation, I guess, or people who are taking that step to practice that, because I feel that we're more conscious about it. We know the effects, and I feel that plays a part in it as well. It's like, we knew how it felt, so why why do that to our children? So, you know, and I think that's and it's hard, because I still know, you know, even people our age, everybody's different. Everybody's on a different path, different journey, and some people are don't know how to control that, and maybe they still need a little bit of time to work on it. But ultimately, if you choose to do it, it is a practice. It's not something you do once and then it's done. It's something that's constant. And even our son, he's 15, and I feel like we're still navigating that. And maybe at the beginning when he was young, we didn't do it consciously, but I feel that we did it unconsciously to be able to raise them in that manner.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of people also fail to talk about sometimes is when like you decide to do this idea of like, you know, raising a child and being a conscious parenting or being respectful or liberated or, you know, whatever you want to call it, is that it's, how do I say this? In a way, it's a very painful experience for us as well. Because you have to, you're going to be triggered. You're going to be triggered when your child yells at you and screams at you and cries and loses control or slams doors, right? It's triggering because we did that and we were often met with anger.
Yeah.
And so we're triggered by it. And so how do we manage our triggers? How do we cope with our triggers so that we don't continue that? And in that part, I think that specific part where you are triggered as a person is like your inner child is like feeling the fear that you felt. Like that's really hard and it can be really painful to look at little Nefi, at little Kori, at little Wendy, you know, and say, yeah, like you didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
You deserved respect and you deserved love. And also healing that part of yourself. Healing and coming into the inner child is so hard.
Yes.
But it is some of the most important work that we will ever do, if not for ourselves, for our posterity, right? And not to say that like our children yelling at us or screaming at us or slamming doors is okay, right? Like it's not okay. I think that's another thing that people get wrong about gentle parenting is it's not permissive parenting. It's not, oh, it's okay that you're being misbehaving. No, it's teaching them, okay, you're allowed to be mad,
Right.
but you're not allowed to hit. You're not allowed to scream at me. We're going to talk to each other with respect and teaching them the tools to do that. Right. So I think that's another thing that often gets forgotten is that gentle parenting or conscious parenting, all of this has to come with very, very, very solid boundaries.
Yes. And I think also like something I think I would add is that, you know, there's a lot of judgment when it comes to parenting.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's, you know, it's your moms, it's your mother-in-laws. They always have, you know, no, do it this way, do it that way. And like, you know, like they have their own notions of how kids should be raised. And so when you kind of decide to go a different route, everything's like, what? Like, you know, and like even like raising Aaron, I think I was trying to buy like some filtered water or something. And I remember like the criticism, like, why do you need filtered water? You could just get whatever, you know, tap. It's fine, whatever. And it's like, okay, but let me try it. This is what I feel I need to do for my child. I'm also learning. It's not just somebody telling you, these are the steps. This is how I did it. So you do it the same, right? So when we decide to take on gentle parenting, for example, the amount of judgment, like, you know, oh, you're too good for that. Or like kind of just Wendy said, like, oh, what, they can just run like around and you're not going to tell them anything. Like there are certain boundaries and it's hard because if you allow those outside judgments to kind of get to you, it's going to be really hard for you to continue practicing.
Yeah. And you do have to stick to yourself. And I think in those situations, but I do kind of want to go back because you touched on something, Wendy, that kind of sparked my spidey sense. I know that you have mentioned about like, you know, the gentle parenting, that it is hard and you have to look into like your inner child and be able to know what you felt and kind of heal that part. And I think that's another important part of it because we're raised a certain way. We learn from our child, but then certain things sticks to us. You know, we might not remember it, but it's in our minds, and those feelings and whatever we felt at that time, it's in there. But it's important to be able to go back and do the work to be able to heal that. And I think that's a part that maybe a lot of people are unaware how to do that, and or are unsure how to do that. And I think that's something that we could go into a little bit more deeper in, because once you're able to kind of go back and heal yourself, heal your inner child, then I think at that point is when you're going to be able to really expedite and move forward. What would I say? Not
like continue.
Like continue it. You know, because we could do it, but then I feel that you do have to do that type of work to make it even better. You know, because I think as far as you trying and you're kind of moving forward, it's the first step. But to be able to continue it is you do have to kind of look into yourself and heal that part of yourself, and find out why you are the way you're doing it for not just for yourself, but for the future.
Yeah. Sorry, Ruby just got home.
That's okay.
Say hello, baby.
Hi, Ruby.
Hi, Ruby.
Okay, just shh, okay. So I love that, Nefi. I think that one thing that I want to say, and I think that I hope that, you know, your listeners and, you know, anybody that listens to this takes away, is that there's no arrival point. Like, there's no like, wow, I've made it. You know, I'm healed. I've healed my inner child, or I'm a gentle parent, and I've done it. You know, I think it's very much a process, and I think that the point is to get to your why, and then to get day by day. Just make it day by day. I think some things that help is, like, of course, therapy helps. Reading books helps. For me, like, a lot of my learning, believe it or not, has come from social media. You know, following accounts about gentle parenting, or, you know, decolonized parenting, learning from them. You know, there's this group of these women who they run a program called Big Little Feelings, and it's all about helping you survive and helping your child survive the toddler years. Mm-hmm. And listening to that and gaining skills for yourself, because there are skills and there are tools that you need to use, but like a lot of it is just being curious and constantly learning. But it has to start with you seeing your child as a person who deserves respect, and who deserves love and respect. Really, just seeing them with a big, deep sense of empathy. Mm-hmm. You know, like, for example, when Ruby was really small and she was having colic, it's really easy to. I think that's when a lot of parents kind of get frustrated, and unfortunately, why we have so many, you know, instances of like shaken baby syndrome is just the amount of crying. Like, it just triggers you, and it just makes you feel awful. And a lot of it is like, well, for me, it was, okay, my baby is crying constantly. This means something's wrong. Mm-hmm. Whether it be gas or hunger or just wanting to be held or being scared because she farted, you know, like what was that? You know, like whatever it may be, it's just seeing children with that deep sense of empathy and putting ourselves in their shoes. You know, even now with Ruby, don't do that, please. Mommy, please stop. Sorry. Even now with Ruby, like, you know, like she's just a child, but I'm also very conscious of like, okay, she's a toddler. She's very aware of us, you know, getting up and going grocery shopping or doing this or doing that. And for us, the way that we start our day often starts with like talking with her and explaining what our day is going to look like. Mm. And telling her, okay, we're going to go to this store, and then we're going to go to this store, and then we're going to go eat. And so that allows her to be like, okay, that's what my day is going to look like, versus, okay, let's go. Mm-hmm. Let's go get in the car, hurry up. and she has no idea. I mean, even as an adult, like I wouldn't like to be, taken from place to place without any information.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'd be like, I'm not getting in the car with you without knowing where we're going or what we're going to do. Like that gives me anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it really is just a daily practice that you have to get. Sometimes it's not even just a daily practice. Sometimes it's just a minute by minute practice, especially when it's hard, especially when they're crying. You just say, I just have to get through this minute.
Right.
We just have to get through this minute, and eventually you get through a lifetime like that.
Wow.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Because otherwise, if you say, "Oh well, I'm gonna be the best parent in the world," and I'm gonna start today, and the first moment of hardship comes, and you're like, "Never mind, I can't do this." You're not gonna be able to do it. It really is just you have to practice minute by minute, but also like you also have to have a lot of grace with yourself. You have to practice grace. You have to say, "Okay, I recognize that I messed up," and say, I'm still a human being. I still have emotions. I'm also allowed to have feelings. I also have triggers. And then coming back, forgiving yourself, and then apologizing to your child because they also deserve that apology. Even if they're 1 year old, the practice has to start as early as you can start it.
Yeah. And I think we tend to forget that a lot because we, again, see them as just little babies that don't know anything, right? So like they won't understand that I messed up or, and so we just kind of drag them along and into our life. And you're right. They're like, what? But yeah, talking to them is, like we said, amazing. It makes the difference.
Yeah. Having those conversations. And I think that's why it's important that we always talk about that communication, like we said it. And that's one of the things that one of our messages that we've had from the beginning of the podcast is about communication. And it's not just with other adults. It's more important to have those communication with your child, which is another important part of life. So, I know this conversation could keep going on forever, Wendy, and I love talking to you. But do you have any last thoughts or any resources that you'll be able to provide to any new parents who are considering or are starting on their journey, on their path for gentle parenting?
My biggest, and I said this already, but figure out your why. And it's a cycle, okay? So I actually wrote this down because I'm like, what keeps me going? So for me, my number one is figure out your why, enter into your spiritual journey. I'm so sorry about all the background noise. Enter into your spiritual journey. Okay, mommy, go with puppy. Enter into your spiritual journey with an intention of healing yourself. Number 2 is understanding childhood brain development. We really didn't touch on that a whole lot, but childhood brain development and the way that children think is very, very different from the way that we think. And so understanding that will also give you knowledge and information about why you are the way you are, why you react the way you do. So that's a big one. There's a book that a lot of people have suggested called The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Sigel and Tina Payne Bryson that goes over all of this. And it's written it's very reader friendly. It's not super sciencey. It is sciencey, but it breaks it down in a way that's very understandable. So The Whole Brain Child, great book, helps you understand where your child's development is at and how to meet them where they're at. The third one is get into the practice and have a support group, right? And that support group can be a friend. That support group can be an online group. It can be social media people who are also practicing gentle parenting. And the fourth one, of course, is practice grace. Be gentle with yourself, because you have to be gentle with yourself before you can start to be gentle with others. And that practice is going to take your whole life.
Yeah.
I think that because when we were children, we weren't treated always with gentleness. Not to say that it was always bad, right? But in the moments when we needed gentleness the most, we weren't given it. Now it's the time to give it to ourselves, you know? And I don't want anybody also to think that our parents were like these horrible, abusive parents. They weren't. They were fantastic. They were very loving. But I think, again, they lacked the resources and they lacked the skills, just like we do now. And we're learning them. And so, like, practice gentleness and grace with yourself as you go through this process. And then start the cycle again. Why are you doing this, right? What's the purpose? And so I think, you know, to finish off, I think that's what I would suggest is kind of following those steps of understanding why, what's your why, childhood brain development, get into a practice and reach out to other people who are doing the same, and then practice gentleness with yourself.
Wow.
I love that.
Yeah. Wow. Like, I'm speechless. I don't even know what else to say. And honestly, Wendy, you're going to be one of those guests that we're going to see in the future, because there's so many things that you touched on that I personally want to have a conversation with you. And we'll definitely have that. But I do appreciate you taking time out of your busy life to come speak with us and having a conversation, because we do know that it's important, not just for us, but for our children and even for our parents to be able to do this and practice this form of parenting.
And can I just say, like, even for our parents, or even for, you know, any adult listeners who are listening, I know my mom listens to you guys, and I want to say that it's never, ever too late, because, you know, my mom, she's actually in the process of she's also becoming a gentle parent now in my adult years. Like, I still need my mom as a 30-year-old woman, you know?
Yeah.
And I've seen her growth and her development. She is doing the work. She is putting in the work to also heal herself. And it has been such a magical, beautiful experience to see her go through that. And I'm going to cry. And it's like I was saying, when you practice this, your parents also heal.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been my mom has like started that process and has started to also create boundaries with us. And I'm so proud of her. You know, she did the best she could with what she had. You know, I think that we're very lucky in the sense that we have this podcast, we have social media, we have books and libraries that offer us all this information in a very short amount of time, where our parents didn't have that. And so I think also practicing grace and forgiveness with our parents is part of that healing journey.
Wow.
But anyway, I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel so honored, truly, to be here with you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you so much. I think that you definitely hit a lot of really important points. And I hope that our listeners out there, whoever is on this journey, starting this journey, as you can see, it's continuous. There's no end. Like you can't say I'm fully here yet. So keep at it. I know, Wendy, you mentioned some good resources, so we'll add them to the show notes so that people can, you know, if you're interested in reading those books and picking them up, we'll name them. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. I truly, really, really appreciated this conversation. And for our listeners, again, thank you for tuning into our show. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we are rooting for you on whichever journey that you are on currently. So until next time, and remember, love is an endless adventure. So cherish your connections and keep those conversations flowing.